I begin as a single drop, born amid the quiet strength of the Pyrenees. Then I become a wild, turbulent stream. I make my way across the southwest, that land of history and hospitality. A river shaping the landscapes that lend me my unique Occitan charm. Michel Serres said, "We were people of the water, people of the Garonne." And the Lot-et-Garonne is proud to bear my name. Sometimes I'm lively and full of energy, like the people of Agen. Sometimes calm, like the sense of peace that pervades this place. This is Agen, a city like no other. Overlooking the sun-drenched plain stands the Hermitage, with its church, its statue of the Virgin Mary, and its troglodyte caves. It was on this rocky outcrop overlooking the city that the Celtic Nitiobrogues people built their first oppidum settlement in around 400 BC. The leader of the Nitiobrogues, King Ptothematos, would pay a heavy price for his loyalty to Vercingetorix. His defeat at the hands of Agrippa's Roman army would mark the end of 3 centuries of Celtic settlement in Agen. Within 10 years, Rome had regained control of the route connecting the Mediterranean and the Atlantic, disrupting the region's landscape and way of life. As the Nitiobrogues assimilated into Gallo-Roman culture, a new town was born in the shadow of the hill, the Civitas Agenensium. The streets of the lower town were laid out along 2 axes, the Cardo and the Decumanus. Agen was one of the few ancient cities in the southwest to possess both a theatre on what is now the place Armand-Fallières and an amphitheatre on the site of the present-day Tannery district. This amphitheatre could hold up to 10,000 people. Ancient Agen also boasted thermal baths, a forum, and a number of temples devoted to the gods. At the time, the river Maas was open to boats, and an inland port was built. I became one of the major waterways. Back then, the city was run by a curia made of rich citizens who owned large villas outside the city in Montbusque, Dolmayrac, or Castelculier. By the end of the 3rd century AD, Agen was prospering and Christianity was a growing influence in the city. The cult of the martyr Sainte Foy, born into a rich Gallo-Roman family, fused with the cult of Saint Caprais of Agen, the son of a Roman official. Both were sentenced to death for defending their faith, and are now buried on the site of the Matrou church. Sailing upstream against my current, successive invasions by the Vandals, Normans, and Visigoths destroyed the ancient city and plunged Agen into fear and chaos. The inhabitants took shelter behind the first city wall. The church helped to revive Agen's fortunes. From that point on, the city would reach for the sky. Agen has a great number of remarkable religious buildings. The Church of Sainte Foy, the Church of Saint-Hilaire, the Cathedral of Saint Caprais. After years of neglect, the Cathedral of Saint-Étienne, situated where the Indo Market and car park now stand, was left to crumble before finally being destroyed in the wake of the Revolution. The site became a quarry, and its finest stones were used to build the slipways that line my port. Convents and hospitals were built outside the walls, and the city's suburbs took shape. Meanwhile, the Knights Templar established a base near the enclosure of Saint-Quiteria. Despite my tempestuous nature and sudden floods, I remained an asset, helping the city to grow. To cross my banks, the first bridge was built in 1189 by order of Richard the Lionheart. But it was soon swept away. It would take several centuries before a stone bridge was able to withstand the current. During the 12th century, towns were growing all over Europe, helping to create a mass movement for liberation. By the year 1150, Agen had gained a certain amount of autonomy. Bit by bit, the townspeople were able to redraft their charter, helping to secure their rights. These events were recorded in this magnificently colorful document, the Oath of the Councils of Agen, also known as the Book of Customs, in which the kings, counts, and bishops swore allegiance to the city and its officials. By the end of the 13th century, Agen had a population of 10,000 and was a lively, vibrant city. Trade by waterway was controlled by the bourgeoisie. The ship mills that docked along my banks were renowned for their high-quality flour. Fishermen, bargemen, and rope makers prospered, and every mooring was taken. But this peaceful time was not to last. My shores ran red with blood when the first Catars were burnt at the stake on the Gravier embankment. Along with the towns of Pendagenet, Marmande, and Casseneuil, Agen was home to plenty of heretics. To prevent Catharism from spreading, new mendicant orders such as the Dominicans began to appear. During the 100 Years' War, castles and fortified towns formed a double line of defense against the English. But Agen was at a disadvantage. As a city on the front line, it had to cope with enemy raids, pillaging, and outbreaks of disease. The Black Death decimated 1/3 of the population, and my floods did little to help sanitary conditions in the city. In October 1435, during a 1,000-year flood, I burst my banks and rose over 40 feet. Boats sailed over the city walls, and the flood spread as far as the Porte du Pin. After a century of suffering, Agen was left battered and bruised, but gradually the city began to develop and within a century had doubled its population. Agen became a hub for growing and exporting agricultural produce. Like the prune, with its celebrated flavor and ability to preserve nutritious qualities while being shipped over long distances. From my shores, prunes were sent all over the world. With Marguerite de Navarre and Queen Margot living at the court of Nérac, Agen became a beacon of intellectual life, promoting ideas such as the Reformation. As a Catholic outpost in a Protestant region, Agen owed its safety to the continual and fierce protection of Blaise de Montluc. When Bishop Matteo Bandello arrived at my port on the orders of Rome, many illustrious travelers followed in his wake, like Jules César Scaliger and Nostradamus. Italy's influence would make itself felt in the city's architecture, arts, and even its place names. Agen made an economic recovery. Factories making textiles and sails were established near my port. Barges jostled for space with boats from further afield. Agen opened itself up to international trade. The intellectual upheaval spreading through France was also felt in Agen. La Cepede, Boudon de Saint-Amand, and Lameroux founded the Agen Academic Society of Arts and Letters. As Agen entered its golden era, The city was adorned with new buildings, the Bishop's Palace, which is now home to the prefecture, and the Saint-Jacques General Hospital, which now houses the departmental council. Revolution was at the city gates. The revolutionaries broke down the last wall. Before long, the people of Agen were flocking to patriotic celebrations on my esplanade, which was renamed the Champ de Mars. The Republic took shape, building all the facilities it needed to function: the town hall, the prefecture, the courthouse, the school for boys that became Bernard Palissy High School. The clergy followed suit, creating the Félix Onnac School and Saint-Caprais High School. Entertainment and performance became more democratic, with the founding of the Fine Arts Museum in 4 Renaissance mansions and the construction of the Montcornet Theatre, which was replaced in 1906 by the Ducournau Theatre. The canal was completed in 1849. Now my 2 banks are connected by the Agen Aqueduct, a marvel of engineering designed by the architect Jean-Baptiste de Baudre. Trade was made easier by a stone bridge and raised walkway. But before long, the arrival of the railway would take away most of the traffic and sound the death knell for my port. I remained temperamental as ever, and in June 1875 burst my banks once again. The water rose by 20 centimeters an hour, and a swell over 3 feet deep flooded the city around the Rue Neuve. Agen became little more than a peninsula. During the 19th century, one name in particular stood out: Jean-Baptiste Durand. After being elected mayor in 1880, he transformed the city, inspired by Baron Haussmann's design for Paris. He drove 2 long, straight boulevards across the city: the Boulevard de la République from west to east, and Boulevard Carnot from the south to the north. These roads were open to automobiles and benefited from a modern network of sewers, water and gas lighting, fueled by the nearby factory in the district of Le Pin et la Villette. This area was a center for working-class employment in the brickworks of Lartigue and Dumas and the factories of Grange. In 1868, local inventor Louis Ducos du Oron developed the chromatic process, which forms the basis of color photography. The world's first ever color photograph was a view of Agen taken from the outcrop by the Hermitage. The poet Jasmin emphatically declared, "Paris may make me proud, but Agen makes me happy." From my shores I heard the tolling of the bell, calling men to war. Among them was a young rugby player, Alfred Armandi, who in 1808 founded Agen Sporting Union Rugby Club. He died just a few hours after the war broke out. From a population of 23,000 people, 653 of Agen's men died in the course of the Great War. Their families read the sad news in a newspaper that first appeared on September 11, 1914, Le Petit Bleu de Lot-et-Garonne, now known as the Petit Bleu d'Agen. In 1939, the bells tolled once more. The Second World War had begun. Early in the war, as part of unoccupied France, Agen saw an influx of refugees from areas that had been invaded or annexed. In late 1942, the German authorities occupied the city. Local resistance networks actively fought back against the enemy until liberation came. The local liberations committee re-established the Republic's institutions and formed a new municipal council led by Dr. Messini. After the war, Agen began to modernize and grow, thanks to ambitious mayors like Pierre Esquirol. The city spread outward into the suburbs and gradually developed into a conurbation. During this time, public works and housing estates were designed and built for a city of over 30,000 people. The car was king, and the city adapted by building the Jean Brouy bypass, widening the Pont de Pierre, and unfortunately, demolishing the covered market to make way for a concrete car park. The Garonne airport improved transport connections, as did the A62 highway. The city flourished economically thanks to two key companies. La Ruche Méridionale, a supermarket chain which in the 1990s employed nearly 6,800 people all over France, and the pharmaceutical laboratory UPSA, founded in 1935 by Camille Bru. The inventor of effervescent drugs launched an extraordinary industrial venture that even today remains the largest private employer in the Lot-et-Garonne. The city of Agen may change, but the passion of its people for their rugby team never fades. Sporting Union, an 8-time winner of the French championship, has been one of the leading lights in French rugby for over a century. The team has produced a great many international players, as well as 8 captains of the national team. These were the years when I was shut away, concreted up, forgotten. I had once been considered an asset, but now I was seen as a burden. In fact, my frequent floods even drove the hospital away from Saint-Jacques up to the hilly heights of Saint-Esprit. The city was now safe, but at what cost? As the 21st century dawned, Agen hit the ground running. At the instigation of Paul Cholet, mayor of Agen, and supported by the then departmental council president, Jean-François Poncet, a university group was brought in, followed by the National Penitentiary Administration School and the 48th Signals Regiment, helping to revitalize the city. Agen became a more inviting place, modernizing with a pedestrian-friendly city center, a new train station, and the Passeline Nature Park. Agen and the Garonne are inseparable. The city's people began to make use of my banks again, spending time with friends and family. They follow the water on foot or by bicycle, by the bridge that crosses to Le Passage, or by boat on the aqueduct. The city brought in new cultural amenities like the multiplex in the city center, the Studio Ferry art house cinema, and venues such as the Florida and the Exhibition Center. Each year at the end of summer, the people of Agen gather to celebrate the city's favorite fruit, the prune, over 3 days of music and festivities. Now, my 2 banks are connected and home to nearly 100,000 people. Agen is a family, a living thing, and its future lies in the hands of its young people. But Agen's adventure will only be a happy and strong one if it draws on its roots and its history. I was a drop of water. Now I'm a river, with a history and a future written by you, the people of Agen. I'm sporty. I'm a lover of food. I'm proud, ambitious, strong, beautiful. I'm Agen. I'm the Garonne.